one pucker. Good. Perfect. Yeah, you're good.
Great, thank you. Like me, noble women in the Middle Ages don't have many legal rights. We're under the control of
Social structure in the Middle Ages. Take one.
Life was simple in the Middle Ages. The king and queen ruled over everyone in the land. Wait a minute, wait, stop the music!
Cut! What are we stopping for?
It's time to change the script, boss. Things just weren't that simple.
Don't start getting fancy with this thing. We've got less than 30 minutes here, not to mention a tight budget.
Well, I tell you what, let's tell a story about a guy named William. And by the end of the story, you should have a handle on the key players in this social structure: lords, vassals, and serfs. Our story begins in 1066 when William conquers a kingdom. He brought an army across the English Channel from Normandy to England and defeated the local favorite for the throne at a battle known as the Battle of Hastings. William became King William I of England, best known as William the Conqueror. So now what? He's won the battle, he's sitting on the throne, but how does one guy stay in control of a kingdom where most people don't want him or his friends around? Let's get straight to the point and ask him.
I have about me a few men I can trust, knights who fought beside me, and as king I own every bit of land in England. So, it is simple. I give the most valuable thing I have, my land, to the men I trust. In exchange for the land, they owe me service, administer my laws, fight against my enemies, advise me whenever I call them to my court. They become my sworn followers called vassals, and I become their lord. I really don't give up the land, it still belongs to me. My vassals simply have use of it for as long as they honor our agreement. The kingdom is under my control. I have my soldiers at my beck and call, and none of it costs me a penny.
William the Conqueror didn't invent this system of granting land in exchange for service. He's just a good example of how it worked. It was standard practice throughout Europe during the Middle Ages. So this structure of relationships became a way to hold things together and to give some organization to society.
Also, the deeds to the land of Hennessy.
It worked because it offered benefits for both lords and vassals. In fact, maybe we should hear from one of those vassals.
Here you go.
Hey, that looks like...
This is one of William the Conqueror's vassals. I told you it was a tight budget.
Uh-huh.
It was a great day for me when I became His Majesty's vassal. I placed my hands in his. Then, with one hand on the Holy Scriptures, I took an oath.
An oath?
Yes, it was part of a formal ceremony called homage, which established his loyalty to his lord.
I promise, by my faith, that from this time onward I will be faithful to King William entirely, against every man, in good faith, without deception. My lord the king has given me a great many lands, 55 estates throughout England. On those lands of those estates, I can produce food, manufacture things like tools, clothes, and weapons that make me a rich man and a powerful man too. Because now, I am granting some of those estates to other knights. That means I am creating vassals of my own. I am their lord, and they swear loyalty and service to me as I swore to my lord. Most of my vassals have been given land in exchange for giving me 40 days military service every year. If they fail in their obligations, the land returns to me. And if my lord, the king, breaks faith with me, oppresses me, or harms my family, I, like any other vassal, may renounce my oath.
So if that happens, who gets the land?
The land must return to the original lord. But If the formal vassal refuses to return it, the lord must get it back at the point of a sword.
Okay, let's stop the story a minute. Time to sketch in the bigger picture. This deal between the lords and vassals is what we call a feudal relationship. And it wasn't always about exchanging land for military service. Let's get the lowdown on the other kinds of deals.
The feudal relationship works like this. First, you've got a lord. Then you've got the lord's lands. Then you've got a vassal. The lord gives the land to the vassal. The vassal promises to serve the lord. Important point, the land still belongs to the lord. The vassal only gets to keep it as long as he serves the lord like he promised he would. If the vassal gets a lot of land, he can give some of it to a vassal of his own. So vassal A becomes the lord for vassal B, but the land still really belongs to the first lord. And now, if vassal B gives a piece of this same land to someone else, you can see how it starts getting complicated. But it all paid off when the lord called his vassals to fight for him at war, because all the lord's vassals, including the vassals of A and B and so on, would assemble as a sizable army. Besides, the land still belonged to the lord.
Smart kid. But there is one thing to add. Land wasn't the only thing a lord could swap for service. It could be anything of value. That something of value was called a fief. True, it was usually land, but a fief might also be a public office, or a high position in the church, or the right to collect certain fees or taxes. And in exchange for the fief, the vassal usually agreed to fight for the lord. But sometimes he agreed to give money so the lord could hire his own soldiers. And he might agree to other things, like chipping in to help pay wedding expenses for the lord's daughter, or giving the lord free hospitality when he visited the vassal's lands. So anyone with something of value could become a lord, and anyone willing to accept it could become his vassal.
Now, wait a minute.
Yes, a question from the production crew?
Well, yeah, I mean, you keep talking about lords. We hear you calling the vassal a him. Where are all the women?
Good question. You have to realize that women didn't go to war, and they weren't allowed to do any of the other services that were given in exchange for a fief. So, a lord had no reason to offer a fief to a woman.
Okay, so women couldn't even get land?
No, she could. A wife whose husband died, or a daughter with no brothers could inherit land, but then her family would often marry her off to someone, and the husband would have control of whatever she owned.
Terrific. Okay, so if she didn't have a family, couldn't she just stay single and run the land herself?
Not usually. In cases like that, the lord who originally granted the land usually had the right to become the woman's guardian. Then he'd marry her off to someone, and usually collect a nice chunk of money from the husband for doing it. In those days, noble men and women almost never married for love. They married for land.
So about the only option for a noble woman was to get married?
Yes, either get married or become a nun. Most nuns were unmarried daughters from rich families. In a nunnery, women might spend days educating young girls, tending the sick, or doing needlework and embroidery. Their rules were relatively simple, and in many ways, they had more freedom and fewer hardships than wives and mothers, even in the richest households.
What was so tough about being married to a rich lord?
Well, you married a guy you probably never met before the engagement. And, like all married women of the time, your main job was to bear children. You ran a big risk of dying in childbirth, but your children ran an even bigger risk of dying within their first few years. No real protection against common diseases in those days. So your job was to bear a lot of children and to try to make sure some of them made it to adulthood.
Wow, sounds like they had their hands full.
And that's not all. Many noble women played an important role looking after their family's interests. You know, like the land and the servants, particularly when their husbands were away for political or military reasons.
So what's the deal with women who weren't in a noble family?
For peasants and serfs, the women had almost complete equality, at least when it came to hard work. Husbands and wives worked equally hard, equally long, for equally small rewards. Later in the Middle Ages, the cities grew richer and more powerful because of skilled craftsmen and the merchants who bought and sold their goods. Their wives got about the best deal of any medieval women. Many of them worked as genuine partners in their husband's business, and they usually had full control over the running of the household. And as a matter of fact, some wives of rich merchants or the tradesmen in the later Middle Ages had better clothes, better food, and a more comfortable home than a noble lady or even a queen who lived in those drafty castles of the early Middle Ages.
Weird.
Well, it's only weird if you compare it to how we think about things nowadays. And marriage wasn't the only thing that was very different in those days. Feudal relationships, like we're talking about, take shape as far back as the 700s. They're in full force from around 900 to about 1300. Our friend, William the Conqueror, comes right in the middle of that time. Get the picture here? Western Europe wasn't made up of nice, tidy countries with fixed borders like it is today. It was broken up into little pieces that keep shifting and changing hands. So to whom you swear allegiance becomes more important than where you live. Check out this guy. It's a different William this time. William Marshal, one of the most admired knights in the Middle Ages. Born and raised in England, he was a sworn vassal of the English king. But he also held lands in France, where his lord was the French king. So what happens when England and France go to war? In front of the whole English army, William Marshal told the King of England he could not fight against his lord in France. The king threw a fit, demanded that the other nobles judge William a traitor. Here's what William said to them.
Lords, behold me, for by the faith I owe you, I shall today be an example and mirror. Listen well to the king. What he seeks to do to me, he will do to each of you, and worse still if he can.
Yeah? Then what happened?
Well, the other nobles refused to judge William. Most of them knew they could easily end up in the same boat someday. Nobody thought twice about accepting fiefs from different lords in different countries, so nobody wanted that to become the mark of a traitor. So William Marshal didn't have to go fight in France. The English king never forgave him, but when the king was dying, he chose William Marshal as the protector for the young prince because the king knew he would be faithful to any lord he served.
Wow, that oath between the lord and vassal really carried a lot of weight.
Yep, and there's something else about lords and vassals.
Wait, I've got a question. We keep showing this statue when we talk about William Marshal. Did the guy really look like this?
It's not exactly a statue. It's called an effigy, and it was carved on William Marshal's tomb. Powerful people in the Middle Ages would have effigies like this carved as a monument to themselves and their achievements. Here's another one, for a famous English ruler named Edward, who was known as the Black Prince. Instead of a tombstone with a list of your accomplishments, you got a figure that showed what kind of person you were. Edward had his hands folded in prayer to show he was a good Christian, but he's also in full battle dress, showing he was, first and foremost, a soldier. These effigies give us some of our best clues as to how people dressed in the Middle Ages.
Okay, but is this what William Marshal really looked like?
Well, no. The idea was to make the face look impressive, but no one really paid attention to whether it looked like the actual person.
Okay. What were you saying about lords and vassals?
Remember this guy? He's a vassal because he's accepted land from the king in exchange for service. He's also a lord because he used some of that land to create vassals of his own. And if his land includes a working estate, he gets one more title, Lord of the Manor. Not every vassal is lord of a manor because not every piece of land used as a fief would qualify as a manor. The manor is a whole package, the land itself, the buildings, and the serfs.
Serfs are part of a package?
Well, the land wasn't worth much unless it came with someone who could grow things on it. The serf had a right to use some of the land to grow food to feed himself, but in exchange, he had to tend the lord's crops and do other work around the estate.
I get it. These serfs were slaves.
No, they weren't really slaves. The relationship was more complicated than that. Let's call in a serf and ask him. How would you like it?
You know, I had a feeling you were going to look like that. But fine, you're a serf.
Tell us, you don't belong to the Lord of the Manor, do you?
No. I belong to the manor itself. So does my family. I am bound to live here all my life, as are my children, as their children will be.
But you do have some rights.
I own the food I can grow on the manor lands given me to use. I own what little is inside my own hut. The lord of the manor cannot sell me to another manor, and if the manor itself changes hands, I stay with the land.
It's a hard life, living as a serf.
But even harder to be free and poor. The lord of the manor gives us protection in time of war. When food is scarce, he may be able to bring food to us from his distant lands. In hard times, many a poor free man has willingly surrendered himself to become a serf on a lord's manor.
Did you catch that last part? Bad as things could be for the serf on the manor, he and his family did get something out of the relationship with the lord of the manor. Just like the lord and the vassal each get benefits from the feudal relationship. It's not a system forced on people. It's a series of relationships holding different groups of people together. And there's one more relationship that's key to all the others. For many people, the Christian church dominated life in the Middle Ages in ways most people today can hardly imagine. Some people didn't make a business deal, didn't get up in the morning or lie down at night, didn't so much as cut a finger or bump their heads without connecting it to the will of God. The church and its teachings led nobles to give money and gifts to help the poor. It reassured the poor that they were serving God when they tilled the fields and did as the nobles told them to do. Monks in their monasteries did the work of constant praying for the souls of all the sinful men and women out in the world, and those men and women donated money and labor to help support the monasteries.
Social structure in the Middle Ages. Take 2.
Okay, I think we've got it. In a feudal relationship, the lord grants a fief to his vassal in exchange for some kind of service. The fief was usually a landed estate called a manor. The service was usually military. Got it. If the vassal failed to meet his obligations, or if the lord severely mistreated the vassal, the relationship could be broken. Got it. The vassal who held it was the lord of the manor, and might grant it as a fief to someone else. So a person could be a vassal and a lord at the same time. Okay. The lord of the manor controlled the work of the manor serfs. Serfs were bound to the land. They were not free to live where they pleased, and they spent much of their time working to raise crops and do other jobs for the lord of the manor. But they did grow crops of their own. They could own property, and they could expect some protection from the lord of the manor, which is more than free peasants could usually hope for. Got it. And part of the glue that held all these relationships together was the church. Okay.
In the Middle Ages, people believed that these relationships meant everyone in society depended on everyone else, and that the people on the top had a duty to protect the people at the bottom. It was the relationships that held things together. Okay?
Beautiful.
Not bad.
Okay, that's a wrap.